500,000 people getting displaced, and for almost 20 years or more, 250,000 people living in camps, right? In Jammu, including Delhi.
Yes.
Jammu and adjoining districts.
Right.
Not a month, not a few months, not 1 year, not 5 years. I was one of them. I was very young that time. I was 16, and there were hundreds like me. There were children, and they were my parents' generation, and they were elderlies. The human condition and the will which people exercised and summoned to battle all odds. No writing can do justice to that. Maybe cinema is better, but you can't recreate that past. So what Kashmir Files did was just maybe there was a 2.5-minute segment. That's it.
तब फोन भी नहीं है,
कुछ नहीं था, तब तो चिट्ठियां भी आप किसको लिखोगे, एड्रेस सेंड. So I lost, my parents lost track of me, I lost track of them. We lost everything. Nobody compensated. वो 20 साल तो हम टेंट्स में ही रहे ना. वो टेंट का रिपेयर भी हम कर उस टाइम पे आबिर, nobody talks about it. अगर आपका टेंट वैसे ही टैटर्ड है, अगर टेंट में कुछ डिफेक्ट है, आप कोई हेल्पलाइन कॉल करोगे, ऐप करोगे? दीज डेज फ्रिज में डिफेक्ट होता है, फोन कॉल अवे यू हैव पीपल, अर्बन क्लैप एंड व्हाट नॉट. सो हाउ डिड वी मैनेज दैट? जो ड्रेनेज होता था वहां पे कैंप में, पानी कैसे जाएगा वेस्टेज? हु लुक्ड आफ्टर दैट? यू थिंक देयर वाज अ हेल्पलाइन? यू कॉल दैट पर्सन? द टॉयलेट, 1200 लोग उधमपुर के कैंप में, 1200 टेंट्स थे. पीछे एक टेंट रो था, उसमें 4 टेंट्स थे. दीज आर सो कॉल्ड टॉयलेट्स. व्हेन आई क्लोज माय आईज, अबीर, राख, वो ये राख क्रेमेटोरियम की थी. बिकॉज एवरी डे पीपल आर फेडिंग एंड वी आर टेकिंग देम एंड वी कैरी दैट राख. वहाँ तो हम वितस्ता में इमर्स करते थे. कहाँ जाए आप? चिनाब जाए, राइट? सो ऑल दैट I remember is just a big pile of ashes, and those ashes belong to Kashmiri Pandits. Oh plum tree before my house, I might not return in spring, but you should not forget to bloom again in spring.
Hello, I am Aabir Lahiry. You're watching ABP Live Podcast. Joining me today in conversation is Siddharth Gigoo with his new book, A Long Season of Ashes. इसका backdrop, let me tell you, इसका backdrop है जो mass exodus हुआ था कश्मीर से लोगों का, वो. And उसके बारे में, this is a book he has written and he has shared his life, his journey. And welcome to ABP Live Podcast. आज बहुत सारी बातें करेंगे, all about your journey and all about Kashmir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's an honor and privilege to be talking to you. I don't talk much these days, but this is a subject which is very close to our hearts. It's because impacted almost 500,000 of us.
True.
And many of us, most of us, now the 3 generations. True. I mean, we all know. Now that, if I may say that all of us are living in the post-Kashmir Files age, last year when the movie was, suddenly India awoke, maybe because that's the power of cinema. It had a very brief fragment of what happened to Kashmiri Pandits, a very brief fragment. And suddenly India awoke to that. Oh my God, did this happen? Maybe. But, I mean, imagine 500,000 people, in modern India. 1990 was not 1947. True. So 1990 was still very recent, 500,000 people getting displaced, and for almost 20 years or more, if not 500,000, 250,000 people living in camps, right? In Jammu, including Delhi.
Yes.
Jammu and adjoining districts.
Right.
Not a month, not a few months, not 1 year, not 5 years. I was one of them. I was very young that time. I was 16, and there were hundreds like me. There were children who were born late 80s, right? And they were my parents' generation, and they were elderlies. Thousands have perished. Aabir, thousands perished during those 20 years. Nobody paid attention. So this book, Aabir, is just a footnote to the book of Exodus and Exile. It is just like in books, you have a footnote, just one sentence. What has happened over the last, say, especially the camp days, the camps are still there. Jagati is still a camp, right? There are 2 camps which are like apartment complexes in Jammu, but these are also ghettos, right? They're not home. And those people are still there, Imagine what has happened every day and night last 25 years, especially from 1990 until to 2020. Ideally, this would have literature and books and cinema and, to capture everything. That's why I call this book, it's just a footnote, That's one part. Second is that I think, miserably failed in capturing things. Because there are things which can't be captured.
True.
Because I was part of that camp experience, studied in a camp school, and studied in a camp college, maybe partly out of choice also, because I knew what was happening was extraordinary. And I knew many of us were passing through history. And this is history which was trampling upon us.
But when you say that it was partly out of choice, why do you say that?
Because what happened that time when all of us were compelled and forced, driven out of Kashmir, one of the priorities for parents was to make sure that there's no impact on children who are studying. So as kids, we were studying in schools in Kashmir. I was in a school in Srinagar. And many of us were studying in colleges and universities, right? Many were working, government employees. So when overnight, in a matter of months, starting from the December of 1989, with the onset of militancy and armed insurgents, the call for ouster of Kashmiri Pandits from Kashmir, so we got displaced. There's nowhere else to go. There's absolutely no place in Jammu. So camps sprung up almost everywhere. So these camps were what? Large grounds, and they had tents erected. Most of them were used second-hand tents from the Indian Army and the tourism department. Where would the authorities get fresh tents? So these are tents basically which were used and discarded as part of the tourism thing, right? And the Indian Army, they used tattered tents, so we got thrown into those tents. So my school was a tent school, so 11th and 12th. So most of the people from Srinagar, except the people from remote villages and towns in Kashmir, they had no choice but to forego education because survival was the main thing. But those of us who came from Srinagar, who had some basic means to make their ends meet, parents decided to send their children outside of the state to get them admitted. अच्छा दिल्ली में, Bangalore, जहाँ भी admission मिले आपको, आप private school में उनका दाखिला करवा दो. So my parents also got me admitted after a lot of hardship because there was not, the academic cycles were completely distorted. The academic cycle is say July, absolutely, it's distorted. So I lost a few. We were roaming from school to school, no admission. Sorry, I've written all that in this. It was not just for me. Hundreds. Maybe try next year. You lose a year. These are precious things for.
Agreed.
So I got admitted in DAV College, Chandigarh. I was there, but mentally I was where my parents were. Whole.
तब फोन भी नहीं है,
कुछ नहीं था, तब तो चिट्ठियां भी आप किसको लिखोगे, एड्रेस where you send. So I lost, my parents lost track of me, I lost track of them for a few months. The book starts with the horrid experience. My sister was, I was 16, my sister was 9. We were living in a camp it was a big buffalo shed, close to 20 families sharing one dormitory, limited food, one toilet, and there was nothing, absolutely. So that experience, that lost track of parents, kahan pe hum kahan, then चलो बेटे को एडमिशन दिला दिया. So I was there while I was studying, but my mind was there, you know, and I kind of, you know, I thought, no, I must go back, because what is happening over there? Of course, I was worried as well, you know. Most of us, you know, we thought that this is a temporary affair, you know, this law and order situation. First we thought law and order, then we did not realize the whole thing, you know.
And that never happened in the history, so you don't have any context.
Almost everybody thought that चलो ये कुछ दिन का
है फिर वापस चले
जाएंगे. Many of those people, हमने तो काफियों ने तो अपने ट्रंक नहीं खोले. क्यों खोलना है इसमें? Whatever some of us were able to. Desperation and maybe lucky enough to survive and lucky enough who didn't get killed, you know. Almost everybody was on hit lists. Almost every Kashmiri Pandit, it was all there. I wish तब Twitter और Instagram था, उतना documentation नहीं है. But that's print media था. Aftab and Chatan, all those papers published hit lists, you know. Who owned those papers? Srinagar Times, of course, Urdu में. So we saw that, you know. मंदिरों में, दरवाज़ों पे hit list थे, जो भी है prominent उनको, all that is all well documented now. My book contains that. All of us went through. So I realized that I must go back. Because what if I was hoping against hope? I was hoping that this will end maybe in a matter of few months and we'll go back. But what if? So I was always a what if person, you know. Because as a kid, I think I had also read a lot of Holocaust literature. My dad taught literature in SP College. Very prestigious college. And I had in fact dreams of, I thought after my 12th I'll maybe join SP College and I'll do humanities, literature पढ़ूंगा. मेरे dad मेरे को पढ़ाएंगे classroom में. उसके बाद उन्होंने he studied in Kashmiri University. मैंने फिर सोचा था Kashmiri University join करूँगा. And I had this romantic, you know, thing. It's all collapsed. That world of dreams collapsed. So I thought, what if this doesn't end? It was a horrifying thought. What if this doesn't end? And that thought, it's not ended for the last. None of us have gone back. There's no place to go back. We go as tourists. How shameful is that? That's another thing why I don't feel like going back. I go back. I board a flight. I feel like an alien. There is this sense of hurt and betrayal, and I don't see that land which the memories. You know, there is the days of glory, to days of persecution, and days of exodus. So I have the split memory. Part of me, sometimes when I am, you know, maybe almost every day, you get transported to that world. Especially these days, you know, baraf, वहाँ पे गुलमर्ग में people are dancing, tourists are going, post 370, right? Almost everybody is a domicile. What about us? We are paper domiciles. मेरे पास तो domicile certificate है.
लेकिन वो किसी काम का
वो कहाँ पे है? वो किसी काम का नहीं है. So I've written about what does it mean to be a paper domicile. I am a domicile of JNK. Now it's a union territory, right? But how do I go? I go as a tourist. I stay in a hotel, and sometimes I take a cab. अच्छा पुराने घर मेरे को ले जा रहा हूँ. दूर से देखूँगा मैं उसको. When I go there, I mean it tears me apart. You know, I can't handle it. So I've decided not to go. I told my daughter that, you know, years from now I might not be there. And my wife is a Malayali, right? And she also has a domicile now, my daughter. She got admitted recently to Hindu college, you know. So I was worried she might not make the cut. So because there is a 10% reservation for Kashmiri migrants. Right. So I told her, use this. She said, I won't use it. I'll make it on my own merit. I said, no, there is a background to it, right? It's not a crutch for you. You know, but what has happened? Justice, right?
She won't be able to understand that.
I think she did. So there is a letter I have written to her because I addressed her that time. So whatever I spoke to her, it's in the book. That years from now, maybe 10, 20, if at all, the government decides to declare some compensation, truth and recom, kya hua? The Supreme Court ne to, it's too old a case to forget. People have moved on. Moved on what? How can you move?
The emotional trauma can never be
Of course, emotion, and also not just the sense of injustice. We lost everything. Nobody compensated. वो 20 साल तो हम टेंट्स में ही रहे ना. You know, वो टेंट का रिपेयर भी हम करें उस टाइम पे. आबिर, you know, nobody talks about it. अगर आपका टेंट वैसे ही टैटर्ड है, अगर टेंट में कुछ डिफेक्ट है, आप कोई हेल्पलाइन कॉल करोगे, ऐप करोगे? दीज डेज फ्रिज में डिफेक्ट होता है, फोन कॉल अवे यू हैव पीपल अर्बन क्लैप एंड व्हाट नॉट. सो हाउ डिड वी मैनेज दैट? जो ड्रेनेज होता था वहां पे कैंप में, पानी कैसे जाएगा वेस्टेज? हु लुक्ड आफ्टर दैट? यू थिंक देयर वाज अ हेल्पलाइन? यू कॉल दैट पर्सन? द टॉयलेट, 1200 लोग उधमपुर के कैंप में, 1200 टेंट्स थे, हर एक टेंट में joint families, right? 8 to 10. There's no nuclear family.
Agreed. There was
12,
no concept
right?
of nuclear family.
पीछे एक टेंट रो था, उसमें 4 टेंट्स थे. These are so-called toilets. You know, where is the water? There's no cistern and all that stuff. You know, it's what kind of a toilet? हाँ, you know. So you think you will call a sweeper? Where was that ecosystem? हमने सहा है वो, but people don't know. People know that these guys lived in a camp, but what is it? What exactly does it mean to live and survive in such conditions? There is no hygiene. Women, children, privacy, psychological, that scar. People lost their youth, childhood. जो first 10 years, so there was no marriage which took place. There was no environment. कौन शादी करेगा, right? The only thing what happened, people died one by one, perished. हर दिन उस कैंप में मरते थे लोग, unknown diseases, you know, because there's no
cholera हो रहा है, किसी को typhoid हो रहा है,
skin disease. We went through that whole thing. We almost thought that we'll not make it, including young. Survival, the fittest perished, you know. So what does it mean? What does it mean for these families to have lived and survived and nurtured hope that we will not die, that we will live for our children? And those children these days are, you know, in their teens, you know, but they have borrowed memory, inherited memory, right? They know, but of course I understand when you talk to them, they would not like to talk about those days, understandably so. I am a person who would like them to talk, because this memory is our only heirloom. ये विरासत यही है. Because 50 साल के बाद जो 5th generation होगा, वो बोलेगा हमारे ancestors, once we were the so-called scholars and we have Kashmir was our homeland, you know. Bengalis go back to you know, West Bengal, Calcutta. Malayalis go back to, you know, where do we go? So we are neither Kashmiris nor Pandits, because we have this strange entity. We try to maintain, but we can't maintain. A way of life, culture is rooted in that land. And that land, Kashmir, is not ours now. There is no place for us. Now you see, of course, there is a lot of improvement in Kashmir in terms of the political situation. Almost everybody is going there for tourism, and people have constructed houses. Those who especially get domicile certificates, who not original domicile, because the law changed, right, Aabir?
Yeah.
But what about us? वो जो भी अभी कश्मीरी पंडित है, वो तो बिकॉज द पीएम पैकेज में वो काम कर रहे हैं, यू नो, 3,000 3,500 लोग वो न वहाँ के हैं, वो वहाँ पे बोलते हैं घर जाएंगे. घर मतलब कैंप जम्मू, बिकॉज दे आर ऑल्सो सो कॉल्ड, यू नो,
there's a very gray line.
Yeah, how do you describe that? No writing can do. So I call this book an incomplete book, because the frame you have, what happened those days outside the frame, I never had that perspective to capture everything. तो मेरा वो जो दृष्टिकोण है वो, to even describe that suffering, the human condition and the will which people exercised and summoned to battle all odds. No writing can do justice to that. Maybe cinema is better, but you can't recreate that past.
नहीं कर सकते.
So what Kashmir Files did was just, maybe there was a 2.5-minute segment. That's it. I mean, look at Jews or Palestinians. There's still a body of cinema and work. There's art and there's whatnot, music. They express. We don't have, maybe a few books. That's it. So incomplete book. Much of it is lost. I always maintained diaries and journals. During those camp, I used to write to my dad, you know. तो some of the letters are reproduced. वो सब, you know, खत थे. Grandfathers को उर्दू में लिखता था. My dad would write to me. मैं जब JNU में पढ़ता था, they were in the camp, so I was neither here nor there. तो मैं उनको बताता था कि, you know, I want to come back to you, because I was worried, you know. जब मैं वहाँ से आता था, that time no social media, so I was talk to, you know, friends that, look, do you know what's happening over there? Because we were all slightly left-leaning, right? We were progressive and we would talk about displacement globally. But this was happening
in my
own and to one of us, right? While there were a lot of Kashmiri Muslims who would go back semester break, चलो घर जाते हैं. तुम कहाँ जा रहे हो? मैं भी घर जा रहा हूँ. कहाँ है? तुम तो कश्मीरी हो ना? तुम तो भाग गए यार. You know, तुम तो भाग गए. You think we boarded buses and went on our own? But the biggest loss has been some of us who were affluent still had the money and the means to kind of rent accommodation, private. Most of us from remote, they had absolutely nothing. Land, their cows, a camp में एक memory है, मेरे को याद है, book में नहीं है, because now human memory works in such a strange thing that sometimes you get flashes of memory. When I'm reading my own diaries, this is incomplete. So one part memory completes my other. True. That उस camp में जो हम जिस camp में तालाब तुलू में रह रहे थे, it was a buffalo shed. I think it was April. It was one of the old one old woman. She started crying and wailing. One morning, she said, "Arey bahar, गाय, there's cow is mowing. वो मेरी गाय है." So because she was worried that she left her cow, उस cow का नाम देवी था, in her village, in Pampore.
Oh man.
तो वो जो बाहर एक stray नहीं थी वो buffalo was moving, and उसको लगा, she said, अरे वो मेरी देवी है, I let me hug her. I was 16-year-old. Now I realize what she even meant and her inner psychology. How do you think? I don't think I have I can even write one sentence. How do you describe that inner pain? What happened? But what happened inside us? Inexplicable, So this is an attempt to maybe just paint that little broader picture. That's why I think I failed, because I wish I had that holistic 360 degree view.
But I guess nobody can have.
Nobody can paint that canvas. People who stopped talking. There was many people I know. There's story of a man and a woman who stopped. So there's a distinction. They did not lose their voice. They just stopped talking. Now, if somebody stops talking, typically these days you go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, they will, But this person stopped talking and now it's a language of
completely,
yeah.
But like Mon.
Of course, bilkul, yeah. Completely stop talking. So what it is, you need some expert person to kind of, analyze that. Is it fear? Is it some psychological disorder? Right? What is it inside? वो जो inner horror है, because of what happened, he would not have stopped talking in Kashmir. He or she had great, almost in Kashmir was a land of happiness, to be honest. You would not find a single beggar in Kashmir. It was a land of happiness. Jitna.
I guess that's the case now as well. Abhi you won't find any beggars. Typically you won't find beggars in Kashmir.
They all wanted to live there, be happy and die there. That's it. वो जो है ना, live here or die का सपना वो अधूरा रह गया, because people died after having lived incomplete lives.
अगर मतलब it may be a emotional question for you, but अगर आपको मुझे टाइम मशीन में पीछे ले जाना पड़े और उस दिन को रिक्रिएट करना पड़े, आप फिल्म मेकर भी हैं, आप फिल्में भी बनाते हैं, and I'm sure you have done a substantial work in this space as well, since this is very close to your heart. But अगर मुझे समय पीछे लेके जाना पड़े, तो how will you describe the entire incident? मतलब एक दिन पहले जब घर छोड़ने का पता चला या उसके कुछ दिन पहले से जैसे चीजें स्टार्ट हुई?
If I talk of myself, especially my dad, mom, maybe my grandparents, and many of us, we are still in that time warp, and we have invented, or maybe we are not invented, we have been compelled to invent time machines. Some of us are still there. We cannot come out of that. It is humanly, there are a lot of us who have maybe suppressed it. They've kind of moved on for genuine reasons. They want to be happy. They don't want painful memories to bother them every day. But for some, it is not possible. I can't move on. So I'm still stuck in that time machine. And there are days when I wake up or I will open a window and, so I'm in Kashmir, right? And next to me is my grandparents who lived incomplete lives, but in the dream, Aabir, in the dream, which is more strong than the reality.
True.
Right?
Very well said.
They are happy. They are happy. None of it has happened. Imagine that desperation of the human spirit, and humans changing human nature and creating this make-believe कि मैं सपना ये सपना नहीं हकीकत है. Now, cut to say 2030 or 2040, if not me, maybe my daughter's daughter or descendants, that they wake up one morning and all that has happened is just a matter of the past and they're happy and they've reclaimed everything, maybe उन्होंने अपने घरों का दरवाजा खोला. It's like a movie, it's like a
sci-fi
movie. Not sci-fi, a romantic movie. आपने 50 साल के बाद वो घर का दरवाजा खोला टूटा फूटा और देखा वहाँ पे मिट्टी है और एक पौधा आपने वहाँ पे you planted, because many of us planted these saplings in 1989. My dad, घर फ्लैट तो नहीं है, हर किसी के पास घर है और घर में
फ्लैट का कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं है.
तो we 1989 में we went to ईदगाह, उस टाइम पे ट्रबल तो स्टार्ट हुआ था. तो माय डैड से तो वहाँ से हम घास लेकर we'll have a turf, we'll have a garden. We got lot of botanical garden there, वहाँ से plants पौधे. तो he said that this is a willow tree. 6 साल के बाद it will become beautiful. You will love to look at it. We lost all that stuff, right? Many of those trees maybe are still there, So I quote from Nikos Kazantzakis, one of my favorite writers, Greek, and he writes in his rock garden, "Oh plum tree before my house, I might not return in spring, but you should not forget to bloom again in spring." Something like that, कि मैं शायद वापस नहीं आऊँगा, but you should bloom. Many of those trees are still here. Some of the remnants are still, much of it is lost. The remnants of our traces of existence there are all wiped out. वहाँ पे you will go, you will not see traces of Kashmiri Pandits. Things have changed. So what do we go to? हमको तो अपने traces दोबारा से implant करने पड़ेंगे वहाँ पे. So we have to recreate. So it's what you asked a very very important question, Aabir. That time machine. We still are in that time machine. And we want that past to be back, but वक्त वापस नहीं आता. But we will go and reclaim that lost time. How do we do that? So one of the themes in my book is this time, because time itself split that time. So my grandfather, when he suffered and he lost his memory, तो मैंने लिखा he was standing at the precipice, and he was partly there, he was partly here. घर वो था. अब ये भी घर है, कैंप को भी घर बोलते थे कि अब मैं घर जा रहा हूँ सड़क से, घर का रास्ता नहीं पता, उस घर का रास्ता बिल्कुल भी भूल नहीं है. Never forget, So he was split between the two ghats of time, because every time he was saying कि अब तो मैं महाराजगंज जाऊँगा, अब तो मैं सभा बदल जाऊँगा, but he was not there, So that inner condition, it happened to thousands and thousands, जो उसका impact है अबीर psychological बच्चों पे अभी भी है. Especially for me, and as maybe I age, I can't come out of it. Every day I feel, so I have to suppress it, right? So this book was, I could not suppress it. But because you asked me, so I maintained those diaries. It's also been hard for me to publish this book. It's all deeply personal, deeply.
Good. I'm glad that you did.
Yeah, because I thought that they should die with me, but there was a part of me that they should not die. Maybe tomorrow somebody will blame me. We have a right to know what happened to you.
True.
Maybe my children, my daughter, right, or my daughter's daughter. Because I am a sense of ancestry. Because वो एक continuity थी, वो disrupt हो गया.
नहीं, और ऑनेस्टली मैंने जितना भी अभी तक कश्मीर के बारे में सुना है, या तो पढ़ा है न्यूज़ आर्टिकल्स के थ्रू या मैगजीन्स में या ऑनलाइन, मैंने कभी किसी जिसने उस चीज़ को झेला है उसके पीओवी से नहीं पढ़ा है या उसके पीओवी से कभी नहीं देखा है. यू आर अ डायरेक्टर, यू विल अंडरस्टैंड इट मोर, बिकॉज अगर एक प्रोटैगनिस्ट के पीओवी से फिल्म को दिखाया जाए, उसका बहुत अलग इम्पैक्ट होता है और वो कहानी को बहुत अलग नजरिए पे आगे लेके जाता है. Coming on to the question, how was the entire day when this happened? The day you guys were forced to flee your own house, your own home.
I think most of us did not realize what was happening. We, those of us who tried to stay on, like my parents, वो immediately नहीं निकले, because my dad said नहीं, because he kind of he didn't want to. He thought maybe it's a matter of you, but when he found there were threats, right? There was clear and present danger. There were a few episodes, people especially but a lot of them had to flee overnight. They did not take anything. They had no idea what they were going. But he lingered day after day. But एक time आया, it was a matter of life. Anything could have happened because there were people who were killed in our locality. My dad's friends and colleagues and neighbors, some were abducted. Everything is in the book, right? Then my mom said, what will we do if something were to happen to you? And my dad, I can't be selfish, right? Where will we go? Right? So I was a youngster, I was trying to process, but can you, अगर वो आज होता ना पूरा world, because it's a social media age, उस टाइम पे तो किसी को पड़ी नहीं थी. अब हम किसको ये बोलें कि हमारे
newspaper publications कहीं
no, there was absolutely, the entire machinery was completely collapsed. In fact, it was all hostage. It was all hostage. There was no क्या law and order था वहाँ पे? Indian Army कब आई? पहले तो CRPF आई. They had no idea what they were there. They came with topographical maps. They had no idea. That part of it is in the book. Indian Army आई. Now they have those surveillance things. They could not negotiate downtown lanes. That's why almost they lost the battle in the initial, right? Because downtown and many other Sopore and Baramulla, they were all liberated zones. ये तो आज़ादी है. आज़ाद. It was all because there was no. It was in the grip of the militants that time. And there were so many of them, from Allah Tigers to JKLF, uske baad Hizbul, Harkatul Ansar, so all that stuff, growing clamor for the ouster of Kashmiri Pandits, niklo, inko bahar se nikalo, inko kill them, right? So we realized that something is, but we all know, some of us who have grown up with history, 1947, it was an unfinished agenda. They've tried it for centuries, Kashmir ko hum, whatever. And but in order for us to realize there should be dialogue between the community when we sit together, we had no space to even sit. These guys were Kashmiri Muslims, had mosques. They would assemble in mosques and they would derive strategies. Kal kya karna hai? They were militant groups working in a so-called, they had corporate kind of an environment. They had hierarchies. They had somebody like a soldier, then there is something called a area commander, JKLF or Hizbul. JKLF had a proper corporate kind of a structure. Then there is sub-area commander, there is regional commander, divisional many of them I knew because वो सब तो local homegrown kind of people, young boys and girls who had career ambitions.
कई friends भी होंगे?
बहुत सारे थे वो they last previous year 1989 से many of them disappeared. They came back after 6 months. We had no idea why they went. But some of us maybe lived in kind of a I don't think. I think we did not believe. We were fools, right? We were taken for granted, and they came and the people were dumping arms. अभी भी जो आप देख रहे हो आधा तो वो पुराना वाला है. हमारे बगल में एक फैमिली थी. They dumped arms into there. ऊपर से फिर they चलो भाई. So 10 साल के बाद ये निकलेगा. So they had a long-term agenda. So we couldn't, to process, you need to sit, 10 of us. So they prevented Kashmiri Pandit gatherings so that they kind of, consult each other. Because there was no consultation. The agenda was that they should not consult within community. That is community mein 10 families, acha kya karna hai? Can we go to somebody? Who do you go to? 1990, Farukudla government was sacked. There is no person to go to, right? You can't dial 100. You can't dial ambulance. You can't dial 101.
Nothing.
You can't dial a fire brigade. Houses were burnt. You can dial a fire brigade. Nobody will touch you. A lot of people were killed and inka pani bhi nahi unko doge. सो वो प्रोसेस करने के लिए लोगों को बैठना, सो दे प्रिवेंटेड दैट. इनको स्केयर देम एंड मेक देम फ्ली सो दैट भाई और भाई फैमिलीज में पता नहीं चलेगा ऊपर वाला फ्लोर कब गया नीचे वाला. मेनी ऑफ देम वर पुश्ड इनटू दीस ट्रक्स, चलो भाई निकलो. So there was mass exodus, as you rightly said, and we land in Jammu. That is the first thing because the connectivity.
मेरे लिए एक क्वेश्चन, मतलब फंडामेंटली मुझे बहुत शॉक ये कर रहा है, जब आपके ही मोहल्ले में कहीं आपके दोस्त हैं, उनके अंदर इमोशंस तो होंगे, आई एम श्योर, कि कैसे कोई अपने दोस्त को गोली मार सकता है, कैसे कोई अपने दोस्त को कुछ.
When it comes to Islam, there was no emotion. We have seen ample evidence of that. That time. The Kashmir of 1989 and 1990, there was no emotion because I'll tell you a story. You know, this is what happened. My dad was hundreds of us renovating their houses. Many of downtown से हम, my dad said हम ज़मीन लेते हैं ओमपुरा बडगाम में एयरपोर्ट के पास. 10 साल के बाद we shift from downtown. You know, many छानापुरा में कश्मीरी पंडित कॉलोनी, जवाहर नगर में कश्मीरी. So we all invested. 1986, 87, lifetime of savings. Because Kashmiri Pandits, they're all government employees, you know. Nobody is a businessman that time, you know, except a few. And then there is a huge population who are agriculturists. गांव के, they're not सरकारी मुलाजिम, they are agriculture. उनके पास सिर्फ वही है,
और कुछ नहीं.
उन्होंने तो वो because they lost that. घर भी, you know, they had no insurance also. So those of us who were like, you know, so we will shift. So my dad also spent a lot of money, lifetime of say provident fund, all that stuff. You know, चलो भाई घर को renovate करो 5 लाख. नेबर्स आए,
तब 5 लाख बहुत बढ़िया,
बहुत बड़ा जमीन भी ली. ड्रीम था ना कि हम यहाँ पे फिर, you know,
आज की डेट का करोड़ होगा.
Of course. And then distress sale, everything is in the book. So another thing is that they were well wishers, you know, well wishers. They said, गिगू साहब आप मत इन्वेस्ट करो ये, बिकॉज आपको निकलना है यहाँ से, तो क्यों वेस्ट कर रहे हो. मेनी ऑफ माई, यू नो, द एल्डर्स इंक्लूडिंग माई डैड, वी डिसरिगार्डेड दैट. दे सेड नो, आप कहाँ जाएंगे, हमें तो जीना यहाँ, मरना यहाँ, इसके जगह जाना कहाँ, राइट. सो वी विल. एंड पीपल, कुछ उसमें से ऐसे भी हैं जो डिस्प्लेस हुए, कैंप में गए, उन्हें बोला मेरे तो आई स्टिल हैव अनफिनिश्ड फ्लोर, वट एवर वॉज लेफ्ट. इतना होप था कि ये जो भी हो रहा है 4-5 महीने के मैं वो फ्लोर को पूरा तो कर लूँ. वॉट एवर मनी दे हैड लेफ्ट इन द कैंप, दे वेंट बैक, पेड द कॉन्ट्रैक्टर्स. ही सेड ये कंप्लीट करना, मैं 6 महीने के बाद आता हूँ यहाँ पे. दे डाइड, घर वहीं पड़े. दे वर लॉट ऑफ देम. सो देन माई डैड सेड, सो दिस नेबर सेड आपको तो निकलना ही है तो क्यों कर रहे हो. अनदर ही सेड नहीं करके जाओ. अरे करके जाएंगे तो भी हम इनका घर. So for many years our house was occupied, right? For 15 years I think 12 years our house. And somebody said नहीं तो Indian Army ने occupy किया, उसने occupy किया. First time I went was I think 97. You know, I had to sport a beard and all that stuff. I have written that entire account. Somebody auto rickshaw, I said तुम तो you're a Kashmiri, what are you doing here, Kashmiri Pandit? I said, क्यों मैं नहीं आ सकता? He said, it was dangerous. It was a war zone, large joke. Somebody recognized me. He said, it's better you go back. You will be killed here. उस टाइम पे कर्फ्यू था. I mean, I didn't tell anybody. JNU से मैं बस पकड़ी, you know, निकल गया वहाँ पे. तो कुछ साल पहले
अपना घर देखा
नहीं गया. That auto said, I will not take you there. I am your well-wisher. I don't know whether he was my well-wisher or he didn't want to take me. He said, you have no place. You will go back to Jammu. Taunt था. It was a taunt. Cut to a few years ago, on the same I went for a literature festival there. Imagine, I'm sitting in...
आज से 2 साल पहले,
3-4 साल पहले, 2 साल पहले, कोरोना से पहले. So I'm sitting in this beautiful, you know, Centaur hotel and talking about the same thing. 3 kilometers में मेरा घर है. So I'm talking about that. I can't go there. So there is this another auto wala. He said, अभी आप आ जाओ, हालात में सुधार है, पर कैसे? You know,
मेरे हालात में सुधार.
हाँ, कैसे? वो तो सरकार has to pay attention, ना? सरकार is not paying attention. It's not, you know, just only doing talk and all that stuff.
कभी आपने उस घर में जाके वैसे देखा सामने से?
बहुत बार.
कौन रहता है? कोई रहते हैं?
कोई रहता है. So I have 2 visits have been emotional visits. So what happened during those few hours when I stood there and once I went inside, so I've written about that. You know, it's also that time I think I felt it's a shared trauma because the way I was greeted and that lady who opened the door, she started crying and she said, I can, you knock a door in Delhi and you say, 20 years ago, we were living here, people will call the cops. But when I said to her, I said, you know, मैं इसी घर में पैदा हूँ. She looked at my eyes.
And she started crying.
And you know, that's the language of silence, and that's the language of eyes. For 10 seconds she said, my husband is not here, but तुम्हारी आँखें कह रही है, तुम यहीं पे हो. He said, come inside. She and I could not control my tears. So,
but did you guys sell that house?
Yeah. Few years ago.
Distress sale.
You
उस
know,
time.
I mean, 5 मंजिला इमारत थी, करीब 18-20 कमरे थे, 2.5 लाख रुपए में बेच दिया, right? You know, and we had.
आज से कुछ साल
पहले. So most of the.
But क्यों आप कोई अगर in case I don't know the legalities.
Distress sale.
आप अगर कोई जाके रहना चाहे, किसी का पुराना घर हो तो रह सकते हैं?
2 साल पहले अभी भी, you know, I think you know last year what happened. Again, the resurgence and Kashmiri Pandits were targeted. Even few months ago, right? So we don't want a situation, right? You know, although Siddharth तो बहुत है, right? But our going back is not just an emotional going back now. It has to be. There has, you know, the government owes us this, right? This सरकार का job है. If I am voting somebody to power, and BJP नो दोनों मैनिफेस्टोज में कश्मीरी पंडित्स का पैराग्राफ भी लिखा उन्होंने. क्या हुआ उसका? So what is the so-called rehabilitation? Even if ठीक है, you make a zone there. I am okay with that. Something is better than nothing. You create a ghetto colony. That ghetto is better than. But now हालत इतनी psychologically थी, जो जम्मू में हमने घर बनाए हैं या क्या, वो भी हमारे अपने हैं.
सही बात है. उससे भी emotional connect होगा क्योंकि उसमें भी 20 साल है.
जब ORT 10 साल के बाद when they got rehabilitated to these 2 camps and Jagati, there was this woman, वो ORT जब वो उस पे 1 room tenement, Salman Rushdie writes about ORT in his Shalimar the Clown. तो वो जो छोटा, वो जो हॉरर था, वो लिविंग इन एन ORT फॉर 9 years, शी, हर हस्बैंड एंड किड्स, जब वो डेमोलिश हुआ क्योंकि उसको बोला अब तो तुम्हारे पास थोड़ा 2 रूम का फ्लैट है इस जगह,
उसको वो नहीं चाहिए.
शी कैरीड दैट स्टोन. शी सेड मैं इसको छोड़ के नहीं जाऊंगी बिकॉज मेरा मंदिर यहाँ था. इमेजिन दैट अबीर, दैट कंडीशन, दैट उसको उससे भी लगाव हो गया था. People who shifted from tents, because tents were for 12-13 years, they were given these ORTs. The tent to ORT migration was also a displacement because these people had, चलो tent को भी सवार. Every day women are decorating their tents like we decorate whatever space. आज मैं उठूंगा
क्योंकि अब जो है उसको तो
जो
अच्छा
है, यहाँ पे मेरा किचन है, तुम जूते बाहर उतारोगे, ये मेरा 6 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet, यहाँ मेरा स्टव है, यहाँ केरोसिन है, यहाँ पीने का ड्रम है, यहाँ. So what the life in it, that frame, there are just 2 pages. I have just, what is the frame? When you enter a tent, what do you see? All tents are the same. But many women have decorated. छोटा यहाँ पे मैं धूप जलाया, अगरबत्ती है, you know, यहाँ पे बाबूजी का घर है, यहाँ पे मेरी, you know, my husband will sit, यहाँ पे partition है, यहाँ पे मैं पहुँच. So वो tent में लगाव हो गया था because that's human nature, no? You get used to it, and then they moved, you know. Many of these women and elders, women especially, they carry the tent within them. वो कभी, it's called a tent existence because मैं 12-15 साल उसमें रही, tattered tent में. Many of them वो तो खुद सिलाई करते थे उसका.
सही बात है, कोई थोड़ी रहेगा.
कपड़े का सिलाई करना और टेंट का सिलाई करने में जमीन आसमान. वो पोल जब गिर जाता था, हवा चलती थी, people became engineers, people became drainage experts. कि ये कैसे मैं यहाँ से पानी निकालूंगा, वो तो कौन करता था, कोई किसको आप, there is no PWD, CPWD, हेल्पलाइन, भैया ये मैं आपको. सो हम खुद बन गए. People became self-styled doctors. एंटीबायोटिक्स कौन से लेना, पेट में दर्द है, बिकॉज there is no health clinic. किसी कैंप के बाहर उन्होंने हेल्थ कैंप तो नहीं खोला ना. 15 साल there was, government ignored us. अरे भाई कुछ स्कूलिंग, कैंप स्कूल, चलो भाई कैंप स्कूल तो वही था ना. जिस स्कूल में मैं गया, आई लेफ्ट DAV कॉलेज and then I was studying in वहाँ पे none. So there is just a tent, there is this teacher who is crying inside, but he is teaching physics because he's वहाँ पे I was teaching in a senior secondary school, in a school in Anantnag or Sopore. Now I'm in this kind of a thing. Kids are coming out of the tent, still wearing farran, having lost the sense of season. कश्मीर में सीजन था. There is spring, there is summer.
Right.
So the season of ashes. So what I remember those years, when I close my eyes, Aabir, राख. वो ये राख crematorium की थी. Because every day people are fading and we are taking them and we carry that राख. वहाँ तो हम वितस्ता में इमर्स करते थे. कहाँ जाएं आप? चिनाब जाएं, right? So all that I remember is just a big pile of ashes, and those ashes belong to Kashmiri Pandits. People who lost, nobody knows them, nobody cares. They are memories in our hearts. Many of them are our own grandparents and relatives. At best we will share a photograph of them on Instagram and Facebook on their death anniversaries and a few likes. But imagine what it is to be a descendant of such person, and imagine those people whose only dream was, यार मैं जीऊँगा भी यही, मैं अभी मेरा घर है, मेरे पुश्त, all that, and I will die here. That human, beyond the politics of it. So my book is not about the politics. It's about that human cost, and those people who did not lose their voice, but they spoke a language of silence. It is only those people who know that language of maybe some artists or filmmakers, maybe Himalayan yogis, who know the language of silence, who will interpret it. Otherwise, you got to be a sufferer. One sufferer can understand. If you're not a sufferer, हम तो फिर वही जो चुप बैठे थे, मैंने ऐसे काफ़ी थे टेंट के बाहर चेयर पे मौन. उनको अब कुछ, उनको बोलने के लिए कुछ नहीं है. They are only witnessing every day. God knows वो. मैं
अंदर ज्वालामुखी होगी पूरी.
तो कैसे मैं वो लिखूं? अगर if you are not talking, how do I write what is happening inside?
I'm really glad that you wrote this book. I'm really glad that you wrote this book because this can bring a lot of perspective to all the sufferings and to all the stories which you witnessed, and I'll surely read then each and every page and let you know how I felt and what kind of emotional journey I went through this. Thank you very much for sharing your experience and your journey with us.
And last thing, if I ever write a second book, maybe a sequel. Like
Okay.
Sequel बोलते हैं ना.
Sequel book.
अगर no publisher will छापो it, but that will be a book of blank pages. वो सिर्फ वही पढ़ेगा. It's like say if I ever want direct as my third short film, I want to make it short, 10-minute film. It will just be a blank, and there will only be voices पीछे, because वो लोग उनका चेहरा नहीं है, पर उनकी वो जो आवाज़ है, that language of silence will be there.
और शायद सबकी आवाज़ सेम ही होगी.
हाँ बिल्कुल बिल्कुल. What is that language of silence? And the cause of that silence is human suffering and pain.
True.
Which can never be depicted, of course people have tried to depict it, but to depict it itself is, so maybe I will do that, when people will go to a cinema hall, close their eyes, still watch that movie. आँख बंद करके भी आप वो मूवी देख सकते हो. वो ऐसी मूवी होगी. I think right now we live in an age where people will understand that language of silence. Thanks so much, Aabir.
Thank you very much. It was great talking to you. And thank you for being so honest and so vocal about it.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure.